friends, loved ones, family, mothers, fathers. Happy Father's Day, by the way. And you, graduates, the women and men of the hour, I know that you've all been waiting a very long time to get to where you are today. It's more than the 4 or 5 or 6 years that it's taken to complete your courses and lab work. Hey, life gets in the way sometimes. And you know what? I want to talk about that concept of life. It's deceptively simple. You know just as well as I do, finishing degrees in ecology and evolutionary biology, that life is almost impossible to define, what with all the viruses and synthetic organisms mucking up our perfect textbook definitions. It's an elegant 4-letter word, life. It's the basis of your entire academic career up to this point. And yet for each of us, it holds deep, disparate meaning and promise that we cannot begin to fathom. I mentioned that sometimes life gets in the way. It's an odd turn of phrase that we use to define what exactly? The distractions that pull us away from our real lives, our supposed to lives? How can life possibly get in the way of, well, life? I'm reminded of a movie that I loved watching when I was in high school. It's about a group of kids in my home state who are graduating and trying to figure out what to do next. And even though it's set in Texas in the 1970s, I think it's still pretty relevant. You guys have seen Dazed and Confused, right? I'm not aging myself here. Yeah, all right. Well, there's this scene where Cynthia Dunn, the character with curly red hair, is sitting behind the wheel of her car, agonizing about just the point of it all. And she asks her friend Tony, don't you ever feel like everything we do and everything we've been taught is just to service the future? And then she continues, if we're all gonna die anyway, shouldn't we be enjoying ourselves now? You know, I'd like to quit thinking of the present, like right now, as some minor, insignificant preamble to something else. And this is an unbelievably important epiphany that most of us come to at some point or another in our lives. And if you don't, it's hard to calculate just what you'll miss out on emotionally and psychologically. Because you know what? You are alive right now. You were alive the whole time that you were working toward the degree you've so rightfully earned and are here today to celebrate. And as long as you continue to be alive, the future is just that. It's the stuff that hasn't happened yet. You have 0 degree of certainty as to what it'll bring you, and your hindsight just won't set in until those experiences have been etched into your past. And as you continue, destined to be forever trapped in the present, you must always remember that you are alive today, and that today is not simply some dress rehearsal for the real living that you'll do sometime in the future, you know, once you finish that next degree, or you get that really important job, or you find the partner you've been searching for, or become a mom or a dad if you're so inclined. See, I remember when I first started college, I was only 16 years old, but I knew exactly what I wanted. I was a singer. I was a pretty good one. Not as good as our singer here today, though, I've got to admit. I sang jazz and classical music mostly, and that's what I was going to study. I never really thought about the fact that studying vocal jazz at my alma mater, the University of North Texas, one of the most competitive jazz schools in the country, would be, you know, hard. I never prepared for the hours of music theory or piano lessons I'd have to take, and I really suck at playing piano. And I really didn't prepare to change majors my sophomore year. But psychology seemed easy enough, and philosophy was interesting enough, so together they do me just fine until I figured out that next thing, life. The life I was preparing for in my safe little university incubator. And I never really expected to do an honors thesis and collect data on people with brain damage alongside a successful neuropsychologist. And I really didn't anticipate finding myself fascinated with the brain, with its neurons, with their synaptic connections, and the vast, complex networks that they form and reform throughout our lives. And the animal research, and the TAing of bio intro labs. You really think that when I was growing up, I thought to myself, you know, when I'm in my 20s, I'm gonna be elbow deep in mouse blood and pig guts every day. Not exactly. But there I was finishing my master's degree in neuroscience, the next step before the real living began, well, I had no idea what to do next, so I moved to New York City and I started a PhD. I mean, that was the next logical step, right? I mean, what the hell's a biology degree good for anyway if you aren't gonna go all the way and become Dr. Santa Maria? It had a nice ring to it. But you know what? Life got in the way. Or more accurately, doors started opening around me, and I wonder if they'd always been opening down this hallway and that hallway, and I'd failed to notice until right then. But one door was wide and shiny, and I couldn't ignore it, and when I walked through it, I fell in love. No, really, I legitimately fell in love, but I lived in New York, and my love lived in LA, so what was I supposed to do? It's not like I was gonna give up my program and my students and my courses and my little zebra finches that I developed a love-hate relationship with, and my Metro card. It's not like I was just gonna up and, oh, who am I kidding? That's exactly what I did. I moved to LA, and I was in love. And I got 3 good years of love out of that relationship, but also doors. One here and one over there, and I could somehow see them now. Or maybe I'd simply lost my fear of walking through them. I mean, moving 3,000 miles across the country all by yourself twice can kind of quash your fears pretty quickly. I look back now on that relationship, and it's a memory. It's one that I'm unbelievably grateful for, but it's a memory nonetheless, and there have been more since. But somehow, between then and now, I've stumbled upon this crazy, awesome, impossibly perfect career. For the past 5 years, I've been a science communicator. I'm on TV, I'm on the internet, I have a podcast where I interview awesome people like Joe Rogan and Sean Carroll. I was featured in the Columbia Journalism Review. I interviewed 2 astronauts while they were in space. I'm not kidding. Don Pettit told me that after a spacewalk, the airlock on the ISS smells like hot metal. And while he was telling me that, he was floating around in zero gravity. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a personal friend and mentor. WTF, how did this happen? See, I'm not a believer in anything spiritual or religious, so I don't really think that we have a calling in life, at least not in any preordained sort of way. But if I had to pick a better place to be, I don't think I could. Because more than anything else, I'm really happy. And I've had my struggles, believe me. I see a therapist every week and I take medicine for clinical depression. But weirdly, beyond that, I'm really, really happy. My life is just right. I'm alive, right now. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. But you see, there's no guidebook that got me to where I am right now. There was no supposed to path that led me here. And hell, I'm only 30 years old. There's still a whole lot of here left for me to have. I'm nowhere close to done being alive. And neither are you. Now, don't go thinking that dropping out of your PhD program after a year and chasing love from coast to coast is a formula for success. Mind you, that was my crazy road, and yours is gonna be different and bumpy and unexpected, as it's likely been before. You may go on to get your master's or your PhD. You may start a family or join the military. You may go straight to work using that biology degree every day of your life or forgetting that you ever even had it. But what you learned, not the dates and the names and the specific experiments, but how to think, how to reason, how to use logic and evidence, how to be scientifically minded. Those things are going to stick with you forever, no matter what path you take. And know this, some doors are going to be open for you, some you'll have to pry open yourself, but nobody can actually walk through them on your behalf. That will always be your responsibility. And whatever doors you choose to walk through in this winding labyrinth that we call life, I wish you peace, prosperity, and above all, joy. Congratulations, graduates.
Wow. Each year, thank you, Cara. Each year we invite one of our students to write a commencement speech to inspire our new graduates for the future that awaits them. And this year we have a very special speaker. Marishan Venzen has been given this honor. She's graduating with a degree in biology with the highest departmental honors as well as Latin honors. She's also one of our first students to complete our new evolutionary medicine minor. She's been the recipient of numerous awards at her time here at UCLA, including the True Bruin Distinguished Senior Award and the Bruin Life Senior of the Year Award. As a distinguished undergraduate researcher in Mike Alfaro's lab, she's received the Whitcomb Undergraduate Summer Research Fellowship twice, as well as the Wasserman Research Scholarship and a scholarship by the Howard Hughes Undergraduate Research Program. Marishan has won the Dean's Prize at Science Poster Day. She's been recognized as one of the top undergraduate poster presenters at our department's annual biology research symposium, both this year and last year. This past January, she was invited to present her research results at the International Biogeography Society's Early Career Conference in Canberra, Australia, where her oral presentation won the top award in the open category. She's volunteered countless hours as both the Internal Affairs Coordinator for the UCLA Student Stroke Team that works in the ER at the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, and as a member of UCLA's Filipinos for Community Health. Currently, she's applying for MD, PhD programs in hopes of pursuing a career in translational research. Another interesting fact about her is that she was the National Women's Senior Champion of the 2009 Philippine Figure Skating Championships, representing the Philippines at the 2011 World Figure Skating Championships and the Asian Olympic Winter Games. She was also one of the founding members of UCLA's first competitive figure skating team. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce Marishan to give you her commencement speech.
Good morning. To my fellow graduating class of 2014, it has been a long and arduous journey, full of countless exams, all-nighters, but here we are, real and certified biologists, evolutionary, marine, and everywhere in between. If I had to single out the most important thing UCLA has taught me, it is that the pursuit of knowledge isn't about finding all the answers, but more importantly, about asking the right questions. 4 years ago, when we all first stepped onto this campus, our questions were quite simple. How do I register for classes? How do I get into Slichter Hall? How do I get out of math sciences? In no time, we figured out how to get around. We adapted, and with that, our questions became more complex. With 4 years ahead of us, we began to ask ourselves, what major should I choose? What organization should I join? What am I going to do? As a freshman coming into UCLA, with my eyes set on becoming a doctor, the answer to that question seemed quite obvious. Not knowing how to interpret the alphabet soup of life science majors at the time, MIMG, MCDB, EBE, I decided to choose biology, with all intentions of changing my major once I figured out what those other majors actually entailed. On the first day of fall quarter of my second year, I stepped into lecture for LS1, UCLA's introductory class for ecology and evolution. Making no exaggeration at all, that single class forever changed my life. I can still remember the exact moment. I was sitting in 9 a.m. lecture, and a slide depicting the evolutionary relationships of HIV strains appeared on the projector screen. By mapping the relatedness of HIV strains, scientists were able to trace the origin of the human disease to a strain that had jumped hosts from monkeys to humans. It was in that moment that a new world had been opened. To look at more than just proximal disease causation and deeper into the past to its evolutionary origins seemed to me like just what medicine needed. With the impending fears of things like antibiotic resistance, it was not that medicine had reached its limits. We just weren't looking far enough into the past. We just weren't asking the right questions. With this newfound interest, I stayed a biology major, abandoned the conventional pre-med class sequence, and instead quickly immersed myself in all EEB had to offer. It is in these classes of evolution, ecology, systematics, population genetics, and maybe for some, even in field and marine biology quarters, that we have all learned how to ask the right questions. The questions that push science forward, one experiment, one discovery at a time. I always joked that meetings with my research mentor meant that you went into his office with results and came out with more work. Questions drove experiments, but the results to those experiments drove more questions. That was the beauty and challenge of science, its limitless nature. The great philosopher Voltaire once said, "Judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers." Just as we have changed and evolved over these 4 years, so too have the questions we ask ourselves. We've gone from merely surviving to thriving. We found our way around UCLA, and here we are. UCLA has taught us to ask the right questions. So what then should we ask of ourselves now? With all I have learned, I think the right question is not, what am I going to do now, but rather, who do I want to be? For that question embodies the limitless nature of questions themselves. Questions disregard the impossible and seek the possible. Questions disregard limits and seek opportunity. Questions bring change. The most notable biologists we have all learned about in our classes have brought new ways of thinking, and they all started just like us, as biologists with questions. It's been a long 4 years, and it's natural to feel like even after all that, we're not ready for that real world out there. Like we haven't learned all that we need to know, and that we don't have all the right answers. But we are ready. Yes, we may not have all the right answers, but we have the skills we need to go out and find them. Looking back, it wasn't easy to throw out the conventional pre-med plan and let my passions pave my path, but I'm sure glad I did. Living in a time where all you need is 140 characters or a 6-second video to go viral, raise awareness, or even, dare I say, change the world, our generation is anything but conventional, and we are no exception. One of the great innovators in our own lifetimes, Steve Jobs, said, "Stay hungry." To that I add, stay curious. Keep asking those questions UCLA has taught you to ask. Keep asking those questions that disregard the status quo and instead seek the new, the innovative, the impossible. Just look how far our questions have gotten us in these 4 short years. Follow your passions. Don't settle. Stay curious. Go Bruins. Thank you.